Hello, everyone. Hey, it's the best time of the year. We're in March. Regular season's done. Section tournaments are done. I'm back from Iowa. We got Minnesota State girls basketball time. And I got no better people than two of them that know the state probably better than I do. So we're gonna kick it over to Mike first to introduce himself.
Hello again. You've seen me before on the state tournament preview podcast. I'm still Mike Peden, and we'll see if I get to call any games this year for NSPN. But if I cannot, just like last year, you will see me in action. We've got a lot of feature stories coming your way. So I've been around, and maybe I've taken a different lens than I typically do, but always happy to play a part in this state tournament event. And it's a good problem to have when another basketball tournament is overlapping with this one. It's that time of the year, isn't it, Pat?
It is a spectacular time of year, Mike, and we're just hoping the ball plinkos its way around. So if I'm lucky enough to broadcast, I can say, "Oh, Mike Pete, and that ball plinkoed its way." That's my pet call. I called it on the hockey game in the third place Rosemount Edina game on Saturday, as the puck plinkoed its way around the offensive. Pat Barrett, NSPN, Miss Minnesota, liaison to the high school league, part of the 50th year of state celebration, and a few other jobs, but you don't care what they are.
Well, there we go. But like I said, it's tournament time. This is the most exciting time. This is what we build up to. This is what we predict and do all of our little predictions. Now it's here. We have four brackets set. We discussed. Let's start with Class A. I think I said off the pod. I'm very excited because these are a lot of teams that are, I would say, more well known. Sometimes we get kind of not randoms, but like upsets and stuff, and you're like, oh, I don't really know what to expect. We don't know what to expect, but I think these are names that people are going to recognize, players they'll recognize, teams they recognize. Mike, let's kick off with you. What's some of your first thoughts when you look at the 1A bracket?
1A, I've always said the most unpredictable. I did see a couple of the teams this year, Mountain Iron Buell and Mare Lutheran, because Mountain Iron Buell came down to play in the St. Cath and MLK invite, and Mare Lutheran, they usually can make a few Metro games a year, and then I covered their section final win over West Lutheran. I think what stands out are just the prolific offensive cast of characters. Mountain Iron Buell, they've always been a run and gun kind of team. And if you're wondering, I'm just pulling up all the stats so I can pretend to know what I'm talking about. No, trying to remember data on 32 teams is not easy. I can keep a lot of information up in this little uh, storage device of mine, but 32 teams is quite the challenge. But Sleepy Eye St. Mary's, they average 80 points a game. A lot of that has to do with Morgan Mathewitz. And then Mountain Iron Buell, 80.9. Kelleher Northome, 86.4, which I think is one of the highest. I know Providence has the
Hmm.
highest amount. We'll talk about them in a little bit. So you have a lot of teams who can put up a lot of points. And Pat, I know you joke about what are stats, what are points, but I think those three teams are the top three seeds. And I think they have enough in their reservoir, in their artillery to take the mantra of sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Kate there from Northome Kelleher. I've seen them swapped around. I don't know what we call them. I've heard Kelleher Northome, Northome Kelleher.
I was going to
Someone
ask
think,
you.
well, the hub has it as Northome Kelleher. The high school league is Kelleher Northome. We might want to get this settled. And by the way, Nora Young America is now known as Central Public Schools, so that's
Mhm.
another another name someone's going to have to keep an eye on. But anyway, Morgan Mathewitz, third in the state in scoring from Sleepy Eye St. Mary's. Kate there, 27.9 from NKKM, whatever you want to call them. That's eighth in the state. That makes for a highly enticing tournament, especially if you get to the semifinals. Mountain Iron Buell, I feel like would be the favorite, even though I say Class A is the most unpredictable. And a lot of that has to do with who they played, how they performed, just the one loss this year. All three teams actually have just one loss. But I feel like Mount Iron Buell, when I saw them play at the St. Catherine MLK Invite against Winona Cotter, they were able to take command in that second half. Uh, 2 and 3, I haven't seen. Mare Lutheran, they got the 7 seed, so they're going to have a tough assignment. They play really good team ball, but they don't necessarily have that explosiveness factor that I think they might need in terms of pace, in terms of offense, if they want to pull off the upset. And then the other storyline, it's funny because Pat and I have been talking about this. I'll throw in a plug. The Minnesota State High School League, as part of the 50th anniversary, will invite past Miss Basketball winners. A couple of them who were on Bram and New Richland HEG all those years ago said they would attend. We'll see. But it's funny to see those two schools now in Class A when I
Hmm.
still remember both of them being in 2A and some of those memorable battles they had. So that's going to take some getting used to. Those are my thoughts on Class A.
I gotta give Mike I think I've talked about this before, and anyone that's probably talked to me knows I still stay one of my favorite 2A games I've ever seen a day in my life was Carly Wagner versus Rebecca Dahlman for that state championship. When she scored 50 of the team 60 and Dahlman had 35 in the second half and it was a 1 point game. I actually bought that DVD off the Minnesota State High School League website because I absolutely loved that game.
That is the best high school girls basketball game ever.
Hmm. It,
When Dahlman fouled out and New Richland had one more possession, you knew she was going to score to win that game. You just knew it. That was the best back and forth battle in 50 years of high school girls basketball, for sure. And I think they're going to meet again this year, but I believe it's going to be in the consolation bracket. I think New Richland losing one of their top players in the section final game is a killer for them. This is always the deepest tournament, is the
mhm.
Class A, always. And as far as balance and good teams, this one, Mayor, I think, got seated lower than I would have certainly put them when you look at breadth of who they played over the course of the season. But this is definitely a great field for Class A. And you could legitimately make a case for 4 or 5 of them easily winning this one with the right matchup if they play the right game. But always my favorite is Class A because you just don't know for sure. I remember Mountain Iron came in as the 1 seed when we used to only seed 5, and they had to
Mhm.
play Minnesota in the quarterfinal, which
Back to back
so
years.
because that legitimately could have been the state championship game. So
Hmm.
I'm really liking this bracket, and I've got my sleeper ready. So
I will say, well, I think one thing Mount Airy Buell has a slight advantage because we talked about, I think we just said, Keller, Northrum, or Sleepy Eye St. Mary's. They get to escape both those one-win teams in the semifinals. They kind of don't have to, they only have to face one of them to get to a state title, where the other two will have to possibly face two of them to get to a state title. I will say, in the terms of like back and forth, in the same breath of the Wagner versus Dahlman, Brielle Jensen versus Morgan Mathewitz last year in the semifinals was an amazing matchup. And so I'm excited to see Morgan back. I was kind of wanting to see the rematch of those two. And I think Mike's heard me say this. I have a simple solution. I typically go with the best player I'm gonna pick the best player and to win. I think Morgan last year, I think, she always is gonna need help. One star is gonna need help, especially when there's depth. I just think last year she was so close to getting to that title. I think she gets there. I don't know if necessarily if I'm ready to say she wins it, but I think Morgan gets Sleepy Eye St. Mary's to that title game. And so my championship matchup is going to, I say, Mountain Iron Buell and Sleepy Eye St. Mary's. Mike, what's your championship game?
Well, and you were discussing that. I'm going over notes as I'm looking for sleepers. Maybe I'll start there if that's okay. It's
Hmm?
interesting you mentioned Sleepy Eye St. Mary's and Mount Iron Buell because Sleepy Eye St. Mary's with Morgan Mathewitz, as great as they were, and to be fair, a lot of these games could go either way, but their one loss came against Central Minnesota Christian. So if Central Minnesota Christian does get out of their quarterfinal with Kelleher Northome, you could have a rematch of a 4 point game in late January. So I'd say CMC would be the sleeper, even though they were seeded sixth. You know, one of their wins came against one of the top seeds, and that's not something you can ignore. This is a really tough field to try to gauge as I'm going through all the teams that I think would have a good shot at winning it. And CMC, I'm just looking at their three losses. Okay, one of them came against Bold in Class A, but Bold's not in the field. Ooh. So CMC would be my sleeper. And as I'm looking at this too, at Mountain Iron Buell, they don't have a Jordan Subich like figure like they used to, but what they have done is traded centering their offense on one player and spreading it around. Ananias, Izzy Wida or Wida, can't remember which one. I only got to see them once.
I
I
think it's
think it's
Weta.
I think it's
Weta.
Wida too.
Yep.
Well, and then Farrah Thomas is a nice complement to that trio. I'd have to go with Mountain Iron Buell and Sleepy Eye St. Mary's as well. MIB to me has that depth. And then beyond that, Anaya Thomas, Sammy Warvis, a couple of good role players, Paige Norman. That
Hmm.
is a tough lineup in a class where depth plays a bigger advantage. I
Hmm.
will say the smaller classes I feel have gotten a lot better about that, expanding and making it more of a team game. And Mountain Iron Buell is emblematic of that mindset. So that'd be my championship as well.
Pat, we're coming to you for the championship, and then we're going to predictions.
All right. Well, my championship, Mountain Iron, I think, has had the best balanced season. They've thrashed almost everyone they played. And it's so hard now because there's so many teams that are not good at all. But they have just walked through everyone almost this year. Played Keller and Northam to a shootout at 100-90. And I think that's going to be my is those two in the championship. But my sleeper comes out of the deepest section in the state, and that's Hillcrest. I
Hmm.
think Hillcrest has had the toughest road to get there. They're battle tested, and it would not surprise me at all if they're able to somehow get to that championship game and get past Mountain Iron.
I'll take it. And then
I'm going Mountain Iron's my favorite.
I'll kick it off. I know I said a few minutes ago, but I'm gonna go ride with it. I love a shootout. I love a star player that can put up points in bunches. I'm a Carly Wagner stan, so I'm gonna go with Morgan and Sleepy Eye St. Mary's are gonna pull off. I'm gonna say it's gonna be like a 5 point or less victory, but I think she's at the barn. She learned the layout of it last year. I say Morgan's gonna pull out the 1A state title with Sleepy Eye St. Mary's in a very, very close game against Mountain Air Buell. Mike, we're gonna come to you.
Get your
Looking
stats ready,
at
Mike. Let
Yes,
us know
yes.
what's
Oh no,
happening.
well, stats and all these other factors that come into play. You know, I think I'm gonna go with Mountain Iron Buell as my title favorite. Morgan Mathewitz is a complete player. I don't get to see her as often because of location, but I don't know. This is just me, but I tend to favor teams that have that stronger dynamic that share the wealth, so to speak. And I feel Mountain Iron Buell has that. Morgan Mathewitz, if you can find a way to limit her, I'm not saying you're going to hold her to under 10 points, but if you can limit her effectiveness, that's going to put more pressure on Olivia Scheifert, if I'm saying that correctly.
Hmm.
And then after that, there's just not as much there in terms of who they play or who can step up. When I look at Mountain Iron Buell, you've got three double-digit players, three more that aren't far behind. I feel like they have a lot of options, and that depth could wear down other opponents if it turns into a battle of attrition. So Mountain Iron Buell, to me, they're the deepest team, and I will select them as my favorite to win the Class A championship this year.
Fair. Pat, I think you're the decisive vote. We got one for Sleepy Eye St. Mary's, one for Mountain Iron Buell. Which way are we going for the winner?
We're going Mountain Iron for the winner. Just
Okay.
deeper, have played better competition, I think, overall, and I lean towards them to come out with another title for Jeff Buffetta.
Fair. Now we're going to head to maybe the class that has some of the most elite talent in the state. At least this season it did. We got two of the most elite players in the state and country, and we're heading to 2A. Now, I'm going to start this with a question, and this might answer the last question, but is there anyone that is going to stop the train that is Providence heading towards a record five-peat? Mike, I'll have you answer the question first.
To put it simply, no. And it's not just because Providence Academy has arguably the best player in the state, and Madden Greenway, and certainly one of the most recognized. Just like Pat was saying with Mountain Iron Buell and how well they played in their Class A schedule, Providence Academy, they never backed down from a challenge. Uh, Two of their four losses came against Wisconsin teams, and I was told by the head coach of Wanakee some of that might have had to do with the fact that Wisconsin still doesn't have a shot clock, and so they're able to control pace a little more
hmm
compared to what happens here. But even in the games they lost, Providence Academy lost to Hopkins, but they were able to make a fight of it when Irma Walker fouled out, and that took away the big post presence for Hopkins. Maple Grove, that surprised me a little bit, but they've got a lot of three-point shooting on that team. But even in the games they lost, they weren't run out of the building. Providence will give you a battle, and what they've been able to do with not as deep of a team compared to last year. Lexi Nikolai, not quite at the level of Hope Counts in the post. So it felt like most of the activity centered on Madden, Beckett, Greenway, and Emma Miller-Byrne. Nikolai did come up with some bigger plays as the season went on, but how often did Providence come out on top in those close games? I was there when they held on against Eastview. That's still the wildest finish I've ever seen. Monticello, that game was back and forth, and even Wanakee battled back after going down by 22. So it wasn't the cakewalk that we're used to seeing out of Providence, but they know how to handle it. And we were talking beforehand how Madden is competent enough to trust her own game and that of her teammates. So that means, as we've seen against Albany 2 years ago, she can go coast to coast and get it herself. As I saw against Monticello, she can set up the drive, go backdoor to someone like Lexi Nikolai, who gets the game-winning bucket. That kind of vision is hard to match.
hmm
So all of those factors are why I can't see anyone hanging with Providence Academy because looking at the rest of the field, Providence played two of the other 2A teams. Rochester Lord, it turned into backyard basketball, and Minnehaha Academy lost a lot of leadership and offense when Sine Hill went down with her knee injury first game of the year. I just don't know if the rest of the 2A field has enough to contain Madden, Beckett, and Emma. Madden gets a lot of the attention, but Emma stepped up a couple of times this year when Madden struggled, and Beckett, I would say, is taking those steps to assume that leadership role next year. I don't know if she'll drop 38 plus like Madden has, but Beckett really took some strides. I think those two, Beckett in particular, are in position to make it their team, quote unquote. So, a long-winded way of saying I think Providence Academy will make it five straight.
How about you, Pat? Anyone stopping the five-peat? Or even have a chance to stop the 5 feet?
I'll, the only thing that has a chance to stop it is a bus accident or an injury. They're just they get in foul trouble. He leaves them on the floor, and they figure out how to play their way through foul trouble. Their post kids have improved throughout the year. From when I saw them at the Hopkins game at the beginning to I watched the Maranatha game the other night, and their post kids give them some points and some play now.
hmm
And I just don't see any possible way that anyone's going to come within anywhere near them. They're just the dominant team by far.
I'll be the
I
one to.
thought maybe last year
Mhm.
game, maybe, Orline and Juneman, if they played out of their minds, that game ended in 3 minutes when she scored 14 straight. And
Hmm.
there's nobody, I don't think, the way this year.
I will say this. I agree. I think the five peat's coming. I will say this, and I go back to the Maple Grove game this year. I think what they lost, like when you lost McKenna Schaefer and Hope Counts last year, I think what they lost was that security blanket of as much as they've stepped up. I don't think you can have a game like in that Maple Grove game where Emma and Beckett are only okay, are only subpar. In that Maple Grove game, I think Beckett had 9, Emma had 10, Madden had 45 or 40, yeah, 45. And the problem with that is, they had someone that could match her and had 42 for Maple Grove. And that's where I'm like, Beckett and Emma don't have the luxury of being like, well, we can only have 9 or 10 today. I think you have to get 15, 20 or more from those two to complement the Madden, show or the kind of the Madden superstar because Madden will get you points. Madden will put you in ability to score. She'll pass the ball to you. She will always get you open looks. She'll get to the free throw line. I think Brady from PGH in Wisconsin, I'll take his quote where he said, Madden can be a top 10 offense by herself. But I think you lose the luxury. I think if you get into a game and Emma and Beckett are in the single digits or 10, 11, I think that puts so much more pressure on Madden. So I believe they can. I think Emma and Beckett are outstanding scorers. I think they do kind of go about it different ways. Speaking of that Wanakee game you talked about, funny story, I asked, because Emma had 31 in that game and Madden had 30. And I remember asking Emma, I'm like, is that the first time you've ever outscored Madden? And she said yes. Coach Connor confirmed that it was the second time because when she scored 34 for her 1,000 point last year, she outscored Madden. But that's the only thing that I see as any kind of concern of that. I think Beckett and Emma, as much as I trust that they're going to, I just think they don't have that luxury of they both can't have subpar games, I guess I should say. You can maybe have one at 9 or 10, but the other one probably has to be in the 20s to give just enough help for Madden. Because like I said, she's a top 10 offense by herself, but she just needs enough help to kind of, that's the separator in that bracket.
Eh,
I don't see
Would you mind?
anyone deep enough in 2A, though, that's going to be able to guard her like
Fair,
maybe Maple Grove could have guarded those two.
fair.
Maple Grove has to be the surprise team of
Hmm.
the year. Doesn't matter class.
Hmm.
Nobody in their right mind could have imagined that they'd go into that late conference and play as well as they did all year long.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how good they were because graduated all those seniors. Who would have thought in their right mind that they'd be able to compete on the way they did?
And if I may play devil's advocate just quickly, like you said, Pat, I'm not sure how realistic this is, but Duluth Marshall, they got in after Crosby Ironton fell to Pequot Lakes, and then Duluth Marshall had to hold them off. Uh, the Hilltoppers, they had maybe one bad game, and that was against Hopkins, but I don't, that's a Hopkins team. Maybe under the right set of circumstances when you're talking about depth, Eric, because the Hilltoppers, Chloe Johnson is their unquestioned leader, and she
Hmm.
is their unicorn. But Kyron Berger, Candace Dome, if those two can get going as well, it would take a lot, though. So again, this is me playing devil's advocate, but maybe Duluth Marshall on a good day could keep it close because they have enough pieces to maybe match, but Providence still has the speed. And when I've watched the other 2A teams, I'm not sure I see that same level of quickness that I do out of Madden and Beckett and Emma. So it's not just the skill set, but how fast they run the ball. You got to keep up with them in a track meet, and Madden is a multi-time state track champion too. Two-time soccer. I forget how many track titles she holds.
Three or
Yeah,
four, I think.
three or
Hmm.
four. Yeah, she is.
And bigger court, too, Mike.
Yes,
The
10 feet
bigger court,
longer.
I think, plays to Providence's advantage even more.
10 feet longer on the college courts.
Mhm.
And for someone like Madden, well, and that rest of that team, and they're used to it. Providence, when you're there for 5 years in a row, Duluth Marshall, their first time in 5 years, and some of the others haven't been there in a long time. You're right, Pat. That extra length and the familiarity work to their advantage too.
Yeah, so I think we'll wrap up 2A. I'll do my to no surprise. I think the unanimous pick is the champion is going to be a five-time the microwave, the magician, the magnificent, the Madden Greenway, and Providence Academy. I won't do all the nicknames. I'll just do Madden's. Now let's go to the class that I think has some of the best storylines, bar none. We're gonna go 3A. We have a three-time defending champ coming back, not as the one seed. I don't know if we would consider them the favorites, but we're going to start with Pat on this one. What's some of your storylines and thoughts of 3A?
Here we go again. Orono beats them twice during the regular season. And I think most people would have said Orono was the favorite, I think, in 3A. And just, you know what? I broadcast the Wayzata Hopkins game. There's just something about when you get in that game, and it can be a great rivalry, you got to win that game.
Mm-hmm.
And, Tim Ellison's an excellent coach, and he just has a way to get his team ready for that game. To me, they're still the defending champs. Until you beat them, I think they're still the favorite. However, I like a lot of teams in this class. I saw Stewartville multiple times this year, and they deserve the number one seed and beat Benilde. Can you beat them on Saturday? We'll see. But I really think they're the two favorites. However, Dan Westby's club, I think they're always going to give you a run for your money. I don't care what. They've got a team that went to the state title game, and they got key players back. So that side of the bracket, with Marshall probably getting Benilde in the semis, looks like a dynamite game. On the other side, Cretin and Hill Murray will be a fun one to watch as a quarterfinal matchup. And I still think we're going to see Stewartville and Benilde in the state championship game this year. And I cannot wait for that game because they've been in the state title game before. If you remember the game where they went in the last couple minutes and beat them in the state title game, I'd love to see that one again.
I always joke that Sierra Lumpkin turned into Steph Curry in the final minutes or so because it was a 1 or 2 point game, and Stewartville had that first game because it was like their first year at state. They had their previous coach, I know. And I think JC Rath and Audrey Schindler were freshmen, and they had those, leadership guards and everything. And and here comes Sierra Lumpkin, who was not a 3 point shooter that year, and hit three straight threes. And I'm like, man, when you rise up to the occasion, I mean, that third one, I don't think she even looked at the back, just launched it. And I was like, yep, they're going to win this. So,
This is the perfect time to step in right here. I don't know if you basketball guys watched any hockey this weekend, but Moorhead comes back and scores the last 4 goals of the game in overtime in the last 10 minutes of regulation. And Minnetonka gets 6 all-tournament players, and Moorhead gets 3. I can tell you what happened because it happened that year with Benilde. You're put in a position where they make you turn in the all-tournament team before the outcome is done. And it's so wrong on so many different levels. That year, when Olivia Olson saw that she didn't get all-tournament because it was between her and a Stewartville girl, with 5 minutes left, Stewartville was winning. You got to make that choice. And Olivia Olson took her all-tournament medal off and went over and put it on Shumpert. I'm not telling you that's why she won Miss Minnesota, because she was a heck of a player. But that there are those aha moments, and that was an aha moment. And I felt bad because the girl definitely deserved all tournament. And the high school league has to talk 45 into allowing us to pick the 10, at least the last one, right at the end of the game.
Right.
The overtime winning goal in the state championship, and you don't make the all-tournament team. I'm sorry. It's wrong on every level. How long can it take to type in one name? 30 seconds? Go to a commercial and type the dang name in. So back to Shumpert, she was spectacular in that game down the stretch, and it'd be fun to see it again.
How about you, Mike? What's your thoughts on 3A?
Well, Pat, if it is Stewartville and Benilde St. Margaret's, it would continue this unusual rivalry because they have met every year in the state tournament in every round, championship, semifinal, quarterfinal, and we don't have 4 rounds in the state tournament, so they would have to repeat somewhere, and it would be the championship. I remember Eric and I were talking after Orno was knocked off. I thought it was going to be their year too, but sometimes you just know when to pull that rabbit out of the hat, as Benilde St. Margaret's and Hopkins prove every doggone year. And even without Orno, to me, this field is the most compelling. It's also the toughest one to win as the top seed. Kevin Anderson has kept track of
Mhm.
this in the current format of seeding. 39% of the 3A state tournaments were won by the 1 seed. Every other class is 50 or higher. 2A is at 81.8. 4A, it's a 2 out of 3 chance. Class A is right down the middle. So that tells you how tough 3A has been in terms of picking a winner. And Benilde St. Margaret's has won the championship twice as the 2 seed. Uh, as Pat noted, they would have to get through Marshall, and that group always comprised of athletes, a lot of volleyball crossovers,
Hmm.
and it shows. But what Benilde St. Margaret's has, they may not have the superstar like Olivia Olson, but kind of like Mountain Iron Buell, they've made up for it with their depth. So they've got a good rotation of 6 players who can make plays at any given point, and that scoring by committee can pay off in multiple ways. I know Hill Murray in particular wanted another chance at Cretin-Derham Hall. I think the Pioneers felt they weren't fully embracing their identity yet. They had the coaching change. I remember how surprised I was when Aaron Herman was let go, but what Betty Troll has done with the group that came back and then adding Sarah Popard. It was like last year, Hill Murray got another big three, but I feel like Maya and Ashley Wilson took a step forward. And while Ashley still has a little growing to do, then again, not even Madden and Paige were complete players at that point. Ashley brings that unique combination of point guard prowess and long range shooting. Ashley is one
Hmm.
of the top 3-point shooters. I don't know how accurate it is because not every team uploads their full stats to the hub, but Ashley can knock them down. I've seen her fire away from deep. And Eric noted Ashley's also great at attacking when she can recognize her advantage. Maya can do a little bit of everything, and Sarah gives them that extra dynamic. Cretin-Derham Hall, I felt stumbled a little bit as the season went on. Maddie Hamill is a terrific player, and Isabella DeLue, Sage Gilbert, they've got a good core. I feel like Hill Murray, I know they were seeded fifth probably because they lost to CDH in that November meeting. I feel like Hill Murray would be the team to watch among the sleepers
Hmm.
just because they lost 3 games. One was to CDH and one was to Providence Academy. But I tell folks that's not an embarrassing loss or a bad loss or not a loss you're going to hang your hat about because they all anytime you have to go against Madden, it's a challenge. So, and Stewartville, I didn't get to see this year. I just wasn't assigned to cover their games, but you've got a lot of experience coming back on that team, the Schindlers and JC Rath, and what they've done to really put a spotlight in that area. I feel like sometimes we don't talk about the southern part of the state all that much, but Stewartville, I remember when it was a big surprise that they beat Becker 3 years ago to play in the championship, and I don't know what everyone was thinking if that was going to be a one-off or the start of something, but what the Tigers have done, the Stewartville Tigers, I keep forgetting there's a couple sets of them, is worth a commendation.
Hmm.
So just a lot of great teams. And I feel like I hate using cliches, but I feel it's most appropriate. Whoever gets on the hottest streak, I think will have the best chance to win, especially among the front runners. I feel Stewartville, Benilde St. Margaret's, Marshall all have good chances, and I I like Hill Murray in the second meeting over CDH. We'll see what happens, but kind of like Class A, it's hard to pick a winner because I feel like almost anything could happen, especially
Mhm.
in a class where the one seed is not always the favorite to win it, or doesn't always win it. They may be the favorite, but they don't always claim it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yep. I'll say my storyline, I'll start with Hill Murray. I think one of the things I'm excited to see is their loss earlier this year to Cretan Durham Hall was the very first game of the year, and it was by 5. And so I feel like it's a good barometer for them and for us to see, okay, both teams have developed. I think both have young cores, under um different, coaches and stuff, newer coaches within the last couple of years, Betty this year. And I think it's a good test to see if they've learned. I think another thing, as a team, you always hate to learn lessons in losses. And when Hill Murray had that loss down at Marshall, it was 100-85. It was a shootout. And I think that was maybe something that clicked with Ashley and Maya and Sarah and the team, that you're not always able to outscore everyone. You're gonna have to get stops on the other end and then use your offensive dynamic power. I think Hill Murray will get past that first round. I will say this. If you look at the, let's say, best case scenario and all the teams on 3A, everyone plays to their top level. I don't see another team that has two players with the combined talent and explosiveness as the Wilson sisters. I think those two can put up 30, 40 themselves. And so if they can reach that level, I think that gives them contender status. What's always going to be the question mark is it takes a lot of energy on defense, but it's worth it. If Dawn Plitzowite and the Gopher women have showed you anything, and Tori McKinney has showed you anything, if you can get strong on defense and you can hold them down, you can be in almost every game. I think Stewartville, I always compare, and I know I'm like maybe dating myself here a little bit. I've always loved the like two-person combination ever since the Kennedy Sanders Mallory hire of Chaska. And I think if you're Stewartville, you have the option of you have that ability with JC Rath and Audrey Schindler. They're experienced. This is their fourth straight state tournament. They're athletic, they're long, they're strong, they are, inside out players. And I think they're the most veteran mentally that you're maybe going to find in this field. Now, does that, can they keep that going? I think you have to keep JC out of foul trouble. I think you have to have teammates, if they're going to double JC or double Audrey Schindler, you have to make sure that their teammates hit their open looks if they're getting open looks. Benilde kind of that, like we talked about with Orono, like sometimes you just have the mentality once you get to state, and even if you're not the most talented team, you're the most confident because you've done it before. And there's something about knowing how to win and learning how to win. And in this field, Benilde knows how to win, and Hill Murray, Stewartville, Marshall, at least in their recent history, is still learning how to win once they get to state, or winning the big games once they get to state. So there's where the difference is a little bit for me. My championship game is I I'm gonna go, man, I'm gonna pull an upset. I'm gonna say it's gonna be Benilde and Hill Murray in the championship. I just You saw flashes of Maya, I think, is pretty consistent this year. Like she drives when she wants to, she's very strong and physical, gets to the rim. Ashley's the one that I'm like, if you get Ashley, if it clicks, now she's an eighth grader, so sometimes if it clicks, I put Ashley at that same level as Chloe, as Madden, as Olivia Olson was. I put her at that same level, and there's not another player in this class that can reach that level if she is clicking. I'm gonna go on a limb and say that the brightest stars shine bright the biggest stars shine bright under the brightest lights. I'm gonna go ahead and say my championship is Hill Murray and Benilde. We're gonna come to Pat. What's your championship game?
My championship game is going to be the rematch, Stewartville and Benilde. But I will say this: I my worry for Benilde, and they're the three-time state champ. I want to know who's going to get that ball when it's a 1 point game and be the one to take that shot. I like Schindler for Stewartville. I like Bigler for Marshall. And
Hmm.
they're my sleeper in this and coming back and knocking off Benilde in the semifinals. That's my sleeper. I'm still going Benilde and Stewartville. And I think this time Stewartville gets them. And I like the younger sister as much as I like the older sister. It's
Danica, yep.
for me, she makes them the three-headed monster. Is she can have that kind of game.
I love it. How about you, Mike? What's your championship game and prediction?
Ooh. I feel like this uh Class A, I have always said is unpredictable, but I feel like this is the toughest call. But yeah, this is where I think I'm going to go against chalk a little bit. As Stuart Bill, again, had a fantastic season, just the one loss, but I think it goes back to, you know, Crunch, it goes back. Eric made some good points as well, where Hill Murray learned a few things about themselves. The Marshall game, I know there were some ruffled feathers just over how it was
Hmm.
called, things like that. But it's just a reminder that, hey, this is what the big stage looks like. And I wasn't there, so I can't say if the officiating was correct or not. And that's not why I'm here. But you learn in those moments, as Eric pointed out, what it takes to get to that next level. And Hill Murray had been around for a while with teams that didn't have as much front-loaded talent. Stewartville, they play in a conference that tests them well, and that could bode well for them. Rochester Lord, they're a two-way school, but they handled them well. They beat De La Salle pretty handily. There was that win over Benilde St. Margaret's, and just up and down, there aren't. Uh, you can't really say they didn't play anybody. They beat Marshall, so picking them as the one, I think, is fair. But as I'm looking up and down their schedule, I do wonder, excuse me, if I can get this frog out of my throat. I'm not sure they've faced anyone this year that perhaps could rival the duo that is the Wilson sisters. I think the wild card will be, again, can Ashley step up? Because she learned enough about her game to reach Maya's level of consistency. I think I was there when Ashley dropped 41. It was against Matamidi, but she looked pretty flawless out there. So I gotta go with Hill Murray and Benilde as my championship. I feel like Stuart Bill has put a lot together. I I don't know. I just get the sense that the Wilsons and Hill Murray, they might be on a mission to prove they belong, and every team does. Let's not get that wrong either. But as far as my champion goes, Benilde St. Margaret's, they've been here before, and kind of like Hopkins, they find different ways to win. When they started their three-peat, Olivia Olson and Sierra Lumpkin, and they lost Kendall McGee in the semifinals and still found a way to do it. The
Hmm.
next year, Kendall couldn't play. Olivia took the reins. They got it done. Last year, Kendall came back. Maybe she wasn't quite at 100%, but she and the rest of that group, Presley Watkins, Sydney Friedley, and Zahara Bishop, I think, too, they did enough where they got the job done. And kind of like
Hmm.
Hopkins, Benilde, proving you can win without superstar athletes, or at least athletes at the level of Olivia Olson
Right.
and Paige and Tessa. There's more than one way to win it. So Benilde and Hill Murray are my picks for the championship, but I have to go with the experience of Benilde St. Margaret's. As Pat said at the start, they just figure out how to come through when it matters most in those section finals in state. And having been there for so long, I feel that pedigree is going to suit them well.
For mine, I'm gonna go against my own rule of picking what I feel the best players in the class. I think this is that year we're gonna look back on and look at and be like, that was the turning point for Hill Murray, where they're gonna get to the championship. And you hate to like you don't ever want a kid to have heartbreak, but I think when they're gonna get this close, I think Benilde's gonna have that experience and pull it out and get that four-peat. But I think it's gonna be the thing that turns Hill Murray around, and they're gonna get that close, and that's gonna be the driving factor for them in the next couple years, being the dominant force in 3A behind the Wilson sisters. Ashley's just getting started. Sarah Popart's there. They have a big three. I think Betty's doing good stuff as the coach. I think that's going to be that turning point where you look at it like they got close and they're very young still. And I think every lesson they learned this year and getting close is going to be kind of that moment that turned them around and kind of got them going. So, like for an example, Madden as a seventh grader in Providence lost their first state championship. They lost that game. She's on the process of winning four in a row, going for five now. So sometimes you gotta have that. It helps in the NCAA sometimes too. You have to have a little bit of heartbreak, and it just teaches you enough of a lesson that you never let it happen again. Let's go to the Hopkins class. No, we'll call it the 4A class, but they're back. They're the defending state champs. Some were wondering if Wyzetta was going to get them this year, but Coach Starks and Hopkins said, not on our watch. They kind of ramped up throughout the year, and they're back. Pat, I'm going to start with this. Is Hopkins as untouchable as they at times appear in 4A, or are there some teams that can maybe give them a little bit of a scare in this bracket?
I'll say this. I broadcast Hopkins Wyzetta the other night. I saw the first game they played this year when Wyzetta beat them. Coach Starks is an outstanding coach. She makes the adjustments it takes to be successful. I watched, this is a team with no seniors now. So I thought, if there's a year you're going to get them, it's this year. So Wyzetta's beaten them by 10 late in the game, and they got beat for about the 20th backdoor layup. And Irma Walker was frustrated, and Jalea Diggs walked over. Everybody else is down on the floor. She goes, "We're going to be okay. It's okay," and high-fived her before she threw the ball in. And at that moment, in my heart, I said, this is the team that's coming out of here again. The Boston Bruins played the Canadians in hockey 18 playoff times, and 18 times in a row, Montreal won. Hopkins just has that it factor. I don't care where it is, if it's at Williams, if it's section final, they just carry that. And let's face it, they've lost some championship games along the way, but it takes an unbelievable effort. Feels like the last 2 years they got Maple Grove. It feels like they got Maple Grove's number. The style of play just is effective for them. As you look through this bracket, who's got a game that might catch him? As I look through here, the only team I see that's got the weapons that maybe, if it all goes right, is Rosemount. They've got the shooting ability, they've got some length. The danger always is, how do you handle Walker inside?
Mm-hmm.
I look through the bracket, I don't see many people that physically match up with her inside. And I'll bet you, and I thought Mayor Lutheran got shafted on the seeds. I think Maple Grove got shafted on the seeds. They should have been on the other side of the bracket. Rochester Mayo, I love the two sophomores. I'm sorry. They come out of the little eight plus them. They haven't seen a decent game since before Christmas. And the game before Christmas, I believe they lost at Hamlin. So I thought Maple Grove really got the shaft on this deal. And, I'm looking forward to the semis because I do think it's going to be Maple Grove and Hopkins, and I think it's going to be Rosemount playing against Rochester Mayo, and I'm really excited because I think both of those will be good games. But it's Hopkins' tournament to win, and anyone who wants to argue that with me, they haven't seen them play this year.
Fair. Mike, how about you? What's your thoughts on the dynasty that is Hopkins making their way back and kind of what any team can do to try and pull off a Chaska or a Minnetonka along the way of knocking them off?
Well, I have seen Hopkins, so I cannot argue with Pat. I Saw them early in the season, and I was gonna catch one of those Wayzata games, but we had that really brutal stretch of cold weather when just
Hmm.
about every school in the state canceled. Hopkins and Wayzata played that game, but I'm not gonna risk the safety of myself or my crew for a game. I do have my limits too because, well, I want to make sure I'm around to cover more games. You know what I mean?
Fair.
Anyway, to build off of Pat's point, Hopkins to me has that double trouble in the post. Mariana Davis, she can hold her own when Irma's in foul trouble. Or the game I saw them, it was Hopkins Stevens point. Irma tweaked her ankle. And they kept her out, and that's how Hopkins ended up losing. Well, not completely, but they lost to Dowling Catholic the next day. But no Irma either, so really hard to say how that could have gone. But Mariana, even though she's an eighth grader, holds her own well. It doesn't look like she's out of place. Ava Cupido, Pat was telling me, and I saw this too, can turn into a white hot shooter from 3-point range. I think this is her first season fully healthy in a long time, and she
Hmm.
reminded us what she can do. I feel sometimes when you get hurt, my partner Alex Nagel was saying, "Wow, she kind of came out of nowhere." And I said, "Well, when you've been on the injured list for so long, I think we sometimes forget how impactful of a player you can be." Mara Braun
Hmm.
comes to mind for Minnesota. She's been out of the game for a little while, and even Paige missed a
Hmm.
lot of time at UConn, came back, and then reminded us, "Oh yeah, she's still Paige."
Hmm.
And then you've got Jalea Diggs, the defensive engine. We mentioned Irma Walker. I've said this time and time again. Tara Starks knows how to get the most out of her teams, no matter who's on that roster. And when I look at the 4A bracket, I think I was, I might have mentioned this to you or Pat. Maybe I didn't, but I felt Hopkins Wayzata was the quasi state championship game
Hmm.
for that reason. The other teams, and there's a lot of interesting storylines. We've got two first-time participants, Eastridge, who had six appearances in the section final before finally breaking through in their seventh try. Every year it seemed like it was going to be their year to get out of there, and they finally do it, and they get Maple Grove. I think Eastridge is going to have a tough quarterfinal because of their depth. I don't know if they have enough to handle the sharpshooting Crimson. And then Chanhassen. I know Minnetonka was shorthanded, but you still got to win the one in front of you. And Kevin
Hmm.
Anderson charted this. Chanhassen won a total of two section games up until this year. So to go from an afterthought to finally getting that first state tournament appearance, that is an achievement, and that is worth noting. And Monticello, their first year in 4A, I think they got a little help this year with some of the other Section A teams, maybe not as potent as a year ago, but Monticello, building off what they established last year and getting into the tournament in 4A, I think is no achievement worth discarding. But I'm look up and down at the resumes and the personnel, and I just don't know if the other teams have enough firepower to hang with
Hmm.
them. Rochester Mayo, their one loss came against Eastview, and their strength of schedule to me has left a few questions. Rosemount, you've got the Ramblall sisters, uh, and they've carried the Irish through a lot of games, but Amisha and Ashna play pretty well. Gianna Carpentier came in and gives them that solid third option,
Hmm.
but I look at their resume. They had losses to Shakopee and Prior Lake. Prior Lake had a rough start. Shakopee, that one surprised me a little bit. The Sabres were an under 500 team. Hopkins, they don't drop games like that. They had just two losses all year. One was to Dowling Catholic, who was a semifinalist in 5A,
Hmm.
and to Wayzata. If you want to convince me that you can take on the Titan and win, you've got to show me that you can handle the big time environments. And I just don't know if the rest of the field has enough on the resume to run with the depth and the tenacity of that Hopkins pressure D
Hmm.
and that offense that can beat you in so many ways. So I do think this will be title number 10 for Hopkins and title number 3 for Taurus Starks. And just a reminder that all the talk years ago about is this the end of Hopkins as we know it, or at least that was the vibe I got a couple years ago. No, they just find different ways. The
Mhm.
great teams, coaches, and players, they innovate. They find ways to win, and Hopkins to me has that adaptability, which is why they're always in the field.
Mhm.
So all of those factors to me suggest Hopkins will take title number 10. It would take a lot. I think you would have to get them as St. Michael Libreville did 3 years ago. Kevin Anderson always says, can you survive a bad half? You're going to have to catch Hopkins on a night where maybe they have a bad half or a bad game to have a legitimate chance at winning. And then on your end, you're going to have to play a fantastic game to hang with them. That's my vibe. Hopkins, I feel, has enough to survive a bad half, uh, unless someone really lights it up. So it's going to take a lot to knock them off, and that's why Hopkins is my pick to win it.
Fair. I will say this. I think with Hopkins, we talked about, they've lost some championships along the way. Kind of to your point, a couple things. That St. Michael game, they went down 27-6 before a timeout was called. Probably there could have been question, maybe you call it at 17-4 or 21-4, but they, maybe waited a little bit too much. And that was one of those like they had a bad half, but then I always make the joke and I tell people all the time like pull a Tessa Johnson on Hopkins. During the regular season, she lost to him twice, but was competitive in both them, and she got them when it mattered. My advice to Wyzetta is don't get them in the regular season. If you're gonna get them once a year, get them when they can't get their get back. I've always said that. Tessa Johnson that year, she lost by 8 and she lost by 9 in the two late conference games. Guess when she got them? When they couldn't get their get back. That Chaska, the year they beat them, that COVID kind of shortened year. They were supposed to have a game in the regular season and they didn't. That game ended up getting canceled. And then you have the other things that I think you have to beat Hopkins. A guard who cannot get rattled and handle their press and beat their press like a Kennedy Sanders, and an inside presence who can dominate. You have Mallory Hire and Kennedy Sanders. That was the perfect combination. And like, to speak to Mike, Hopkins was cold that game. Hopkins was missing shots that they typically would, and their press went. And when their press wasn't working, it kind of threw them off a little bit. Earlier this year against Wyzetta, when they could handle the press and when Kate Amelot and Marin Day was giving them the physicality back in the post, it rattled them a little bit and it threw them off a little bit. You kind of have to have those two things. Another thing to give Rosemont maybe a little bit of an edge on the other side of the bracket, I've always joked, it's hard to beat a future gopher in the barn. And you have Ramlal on Rosemont. I mean, Tori McKinney maybe proved that right. She was pretty good that year that she beat them. Now, granted, Tori McKinney was an elite level player on both sides of the ball, and she had that defense to absolutely is probably a nightmare for any player to go against.
He
But
had a pretty
yeah,
good backup too with the Leah Crump.
Crump, yep. And so you
What's a
had
bad Robin?
you had those star players, and you could give it back to Hopkins a little bit. I almost think sometimes Hopkins sometimes wins that game by simply stepping on the court with the jersey that says Royals or Hopkins across it, and the other team mentally have taken out of it. If I was looking at this year, I think Maple Grove has played them the last 2 years. Now, I don't know I mean, Kate Holmquist was a starter the last couple of years. I think Sophia Anderson has really taken a leap forward this year. The problem with them is while they've lost, Hopkins knows your game. I mean, maybe St. Michael and Minnetonka prove me wrong, but I feel like you almost have a better chance of if you want to catch them sleeping, if they don't know your game and kind of maybe burst out at them. If they know your game, you might be kind of over because of how well Tara can coach, how well they can scout for you. I will say this, he brought up the Dowling Catholic. I think she's had a really good breakout year of Ava Cupido has. The one thing with her, though, is if she is cold from three, what is the outside options for Hopkins? In that game against Wyzetta, she came out and hit 4 threes in the first half. And I think they're only down five at half. I think Sawyer Backer hit a really deep three to go into half with a 5-point lead. But Ava Cupido had 4 threes in the first half. She went 0 for 7 in the second half. And that's when Wyzetta pulled away because I think Jalea can hit him. I think Nesbitt can hit him. I think Durant can hit him, but they're nowhere near the elite level shooters that Ava Cupido is.
Cupido drives that. If they are able to nullify her, it definitely changes what Hopkins can do against you.
And that's why I'm curious why more teams don't really face guard her because she's driven at times, but I feel like if you face guard her and take away the three from Ava, that's really going to limit what her offense is that she's going to put on you. I look at like a Rosemont. You have three Ramlos. They could truly just have a defense of saying one of the sisters, you just stay on Ava. Don't worry about anything going on behind you. Just stay on Ava and don't let her get the basket. I would maybe go with the 2020 with the sophomore one. She's a little more stronger, taller, or maybe Amisha, taller and stronger. Like, because then Ava might post you up. And like you said, you have to have a post that can either handle or match or meet the physicality of Irma Walker, who has leaps and bounds taken a step forward. I will say this is where I might be man alone in the state of Minnesota. I, I'm so high on Rochester Mayo because I've talked about, I've mentioned it a few times, the Kennedy Sanders and Mallory Hire combination. I get similar vibes with a Mills and Dyer. And I think Dyer is a player who can match and outmaneuver Irma. I think she's as physical because they're AAU teammates, and she's very athletic, very versatile. I think now, granted, whether experience plays in, but those two, if they are going, they give me similar vibes to where they could have a guard that could run past a zone. They have a guard that can hit. They both can hit threes. And you have someone like Maggie who could be that Mallory Hire, Aaliyah Crump, like that type of player where they dominate on the inside and outside. And you have that 1-2 punch of taking it at Hopkins. If Hopkins, like you said, if you get a bad half or they're maybe cold.
It'll be interesting to see how they're able to play at state, having not been there forever and having had such a dreadful conference schedule to go through the last couple months. Till Lakeville North, who's the last decent team they played?
I think it was.
Eastview?
Yep.
Eastview, really? So that's always the worry. That was always my worry with St. Michael when they were in the Mississippi 8, is you go 2 months without a decent game, which usually leads to you don't have very good practices either, because you go, we've got them. Doesn't matter, or it helps to get beat somewhere along the way in that January, February, so you can say, all right, you can clearly see we're not perfect yet. Let's get back to work. And so it'll be interesting.
Yeah, that section final, I think that's like Sahara Wilson's probably one of the most versatile and physical like the combination of a post player who can inside, outside, she can handle a little bit, she can post. And I think that Maggie was able to stick with her. And I think that's why to me, I'm like, Maggie can give you small ball five. She could be that four. She can even handle it a little bit if you want a bigger player bringing up the ball. Like you said, experience might hurt them. I'm still going to go with, I think, Rosemont and Hopkins as my championship. Rosemont they play outstanding defense. They have guards that can fly around, and you have three Rambles that can all get really hot from outside the arc. I think I said maybe it's just the Gopher fan in me. I think it's hard. I think they always have a little bit extra boost if you're a future Gopher playing at the barn. I think that's always fun to watch. We've seen it with Tori Orline and Tori McKinney. So that's why I just can't find anyone. I can't find it. I'm trying to find a way to be like, someone will knock off Hopkins. This is their time. They've walked into many tournaments and they weren't the favorite. I thought maybe last year Maple Grove behind the senior that is Jordan Odie could maybe give it to them. They give them games and they go back and forth, but at some point Hopkins breaks you and Hopkins breaks you mentally, Hopkins breaks you physically. That press wears you down and they just raise their level. Like pretty much since that Wyzetta loss, Hopkins has been doing this. And I just don't see a team that's going to stop them this year.
I think you're right.
Mike, do you want to make it a three? Want to make it three-peat, Mike, or you're gonna go against the grain and go against someone else?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can go against the grain this time, and it's just because I can't find enough of a compelling reason to do so compared to 3A or Class A, where okay, yes, I picked the one seed to win in Class A, but you could easily have more candidates. I don't, I forgot to mention last year's championship, a 4 and 7 seed. I don't think anyone was expecting that. Maybe in the big tournaments,
Hmm.
perhaps, but not here. But it goes back to these other teams, right? They have players who can step up, but can you put all of that together for one complete game against Hopkins? And this goes into the big question marks with Rosemount. They had a couple of losses to sub 500 teams. Now, Prior Lake in a tough section, in a tough conference, and they
Hmm.
played Minnetonka pretty close. So that one I can give you. Shakopee was a little more bizarre. And to me, that's not something that legitimate teams
Right.
absorb or suffer. Teams that have a legitimate chance to win it, they don't give up those games that are head scratchers. Rochester Mayo, a lot of it has to do with the Big Nine conference affiliation. And a couple of the non-conference games, I felt, I don't know how the scheduling all works out, but I feel they miss some opportunities to maybe test that metal a little more. Maple Grove and Eastview are two solid teams, but outside of that, Eden Prairie, Waconia wasn't bad. Eden Prairie's rebuilding. Brainerd was okay. And Lakeville North, they played them twice. I just don't know if they're going to be fully prepared. And some of that, again, isn't their fault because of where their conference is. But when your conference doesn't give you enough of a challenge, that's where I feel you really have to make the most of those non-conference games. I'm not sure Rochester Mayo has done that, but I will take what you said, Eric, into consideration as well, because maybe that could be a surprise. So as much as I would want to go against the grain just to make just to make this more exciting, I just don't see enough from the other teams to suggest that they could check off every item on that list you would need to beat Hopkins and prevail. If Ava gets cold from the outside, maybe that takes away their outside game, but they still have a heck of an inside game. And when you've got the leader like Jalea Diggs who can pressure you into turnovers, errors, and just make you uncomfortable, how can you keep up with that speed? So Hopkins to me has the tool set more than enough to pull it off, even if things aren't going 100% in their favor. So Hopkins is my championship. As far as who gets out of it, I think I'd have to go with Rosemount just out of that group. I think they're in the best position to do it. But yeah, I think this will be another banner year for Hopkins. And as I said a few minutes ago, they just keep proving everyone why they
Hmm.
continue to contend. I've heard not a ton, but over the years, I go back to all the chatter and conversation about, well, what are they going to have in future years? Are they going to be able to keep the pipeline going? Every year, Tara Starks finds a way to extend this reign, and
Hmm.
how they do it again just speaks volumes. It's one thing when you have a starting lineup full of high-level Division One players,
Hmm.
and the group that they've had the last couple of years, maybe they're not in the same level of conversation as Amaya Battle or Taylor Woodson or Liv McGill or Paige, Maya Naji, but they get it done.
Hmm.
And that gets my attention.
When you think about Hopkins, do you talk to people about Hopkins because of their great offense or their great defense? Brian Cosgrove, Tara Starks, it's the defense that
Hmm.
that engine away. It's the fear they put into you with the way they defend the basketball. And that's their calling card. Have they had a lot of great offense players? Sure. But it's the defense that scares the crap out of everybody when you walk on the floor against Hopkins.
And to highlight that, I mean, I know we talked about even with Ava and the threes. I mean, if you look at their second game at Wyzetta when they won 74-71, they hit 1 3 as a team. Ava Cupido hit 1 3 at the beginning of the second, I think the beginning of the third quarter of the second half. And that's their only three they had, and they still won. I mean, it's one of the weapons you can take away, but if they can, I think that three-pointer becomes a concern for them only if in like the first game against Wayzata, they're not getting turnovers, they're not getting out and getting fast breaks. You're kind of matching. I always say this with Hopkins, you have to punch him back when they're going to throw the first punch, they're always going to come out with that energy and stuff. If you give it back to them, your only hope is that maybe it kind of startles them because, like you said, we talked about half the time they've defeated teams walking onto the court because you're like, well, this is Hopkins, and then they're so worried about their pressure and their guards and their on-ball defense, and then when they get out to success, it's like, well, now it's over because no one has that fortitude to kind of push through that. And so I said, but that was that game against Wayzata because Wayzata had beat him the first time, and it was a close back and forth game. And I kept thinking, I'm like, Hopkins is going to have to find an outside shot to win this, and they did. I said they hit 1 3 all game long, and they found a way to secure that win. And that was kind of where I'm like, they can grind you down, they can win defensive battles, they can win offensive battles, especially if they can get going offensively and they can hold you defensively, then you have no prayer. So it's now if you let me have like a group of 10 players from the other seven teams in the 4A field, I'll give myself a chance. But I don't think any individual team has enough to get them.
It's interesting how many young kids and how many new teams are in here. Hill Murray with the Wilson sisters haven't been here. You look through the 4A bracket. Eastridge never been to state. Chanhassen never been to state. There's four teams this year who've never been to state. And then 1A, it's Kelleher and Hillcrest. Never,
Mhm.
ever been to state. You know, Chloe Johnson, great player, never been to state. And I said, sooner or later, even the great player looks up and goes, I'm not sure I should be here yet, especially if things don't start well. And there's a lot of good players in here who have never been here before. It'll be interesting to see how they play when the bright lights are on.
Mhm. I want to ask each of you a question and to wrap this up. I'll spring this on you here. This can be over all four classes. Give me one player that you think we may not be talking about, maybe isn't a household name right now, and by Saturday night and that final buzzer on game four, the state of Minnesota is going to know that name. If any of the four classes, who's a name that they're going to know by the end of the tournament? Well, we can start with Mike or Pat. Either one of you can go.
Well, because they've never seen her before, I'd say Chloe Johnson. People know the name, but really, unless you're a basketball fanatic and have
Right.
seen her breakdowns, you might not know just who she really is. And she's the one to me. I saw her play against Proctor up at Superior,
Hmm.
noticeably better than she was last year. Night and day to me, better. And I'm really excited to see her play at the state tournament. Much as I wanted to see Tori one more time, I'm really excited to see her at state. That's mine.
I can go, Mike, if you want to have him one more time, or if you got one, I'll let you go.
Well, I was thinking of what Pat said, and there were a few jokes among my colleagues. And to be clear, we don't root for any player or team over another, but there were a few sad faces that Tori didn't get one more shot at state because I think some feel like she doesn't get as much plaudits or as much press compared to Madden Greenway. But sometimes that's how the dice rolls. Connor Getz and Pete Vukovic both said, or relayed, inferred that it's a shame they both had to be in the same year because what they've done is remarkable. And I said this in my stand up for the story that I'm doing that will reflect on Madden and Tori and this unprecedented run with history. But why are we talking about it so much? It's because we may never see this side again where two young women are battling for multiple records. There was a time when I was thinking, could anyone make a run at Rebecca Dahlman's mark? And Kevin Anderson, I cite him a lot. Of course, we all know him well.
Hmm.
Pat and Kevin, I think, yeah, you traveled together in 7-2A because I was sharing notes with, and he was right next to you. So in any event, I remember him saying, in order to do that, someone would have to start early in seventh grade and look at the pipeline of players that have come through since then. Don't ask me to guess how soon before someone can make a run at Madden's marks. She has a chance to make one more record, by the way. She's 110 from the all-time single season scoring record,
Don't
which
put it
Rebecca
past her.
Dahlman holds.
Don't put it past her.
Well, that's 110. That's within reach because she just needs to average about 36, 37, and she's right on that mark. Knowing Madden, I could see her going for it just because
Hmm.
she gets after it like that. She dropped 60 one time on Minnehaha Academy. That's how far she goes, just to get a milestone out of the way, I think. Pat, I agree with you. Chloe Johnson, yes, she is a household name. She's the number 3 recruit nationally by ESPN, but like you said, it's different when the state tournament crowd gets to see it who maybe aren't as engaged as we are. I feel the Wilson sisters in that same breath. Maya getting
Hmm.
tons of attention. She holds school records at Hill Murray for points and rebounds, and she didn't even start there. She was at Matabidi the first couple of years, didn't come to Hill Murray until she was a freshman, which tells you how quick her ascension has been in this sport. I feel like those two will get more attention from the casuals by being in this state tournament. I don't know if you were looking for that, Eric, or maybe this out of left field player, but
No.
maybe, well, on the Hopkins side, I plugged her earlier. I know she comes off the bench, but it's like, you know what? Maybe Mariana Davis, Irma Walker gets a lot of love for what she does as an undersized post, and I'm certainly not going to take away what she can do. Every time I see a Hopkins game, Irma plays like she's 6'11", not 5'11", but I really like how Mariana Davis compliments her and can
Hmm.
get in there. She's younger, but Tara Starks wouldn't put her in if she didn't trust her abilities. So maybe Mariana Davis would be my X factor in terms of a player who might come away with a little more name recognition following this tournament.
Fair. I mentioned mine and I said I'm a huge fan of her game, maybe more than anyone else in the state, maybe. I think Maggie Dyer is one of the most underrated players in the state. She's a 2028. She, played up a grade to North Tartan, so she was on the 16U team that won a national championship for North Tartan. I just think that there's something about that combination of a physical stretch four who can handle, who can shoot, but also is just so underrated and like underappreciated physical down low. She doesn't shy away from contact. She has really nice footwork when she's trying to post up smaller defenders. I love her determination for rebounds. I think her game kind of just encapsulates everything they try to do. Like she's going to do everything. She's that type of player that will do anything that's needed for her team to try and win. And I just think that's a name that people are going to see. I have her as like a top 5 kid in that extremely deep 2028 class in the state of Minnesota. I think power forwards are going to start looking at her real quick if they already are not. Maggie Dyer's my pick for that player that's like, I think she's going to open up eyes, or people are like, said they're down in Rochester. Maybe they don't play the best schedule, so they're not getting those big time games. I think if they can get past that first round and even get kind of like on Channel 45, when you get on those games and people, casuals can see you, she has that game that to me, that hard hat player that people fall in love with. So my pick's going to be Maggie Dyer from Rochester, Mayo.
It's a great call, Eric. She is such a well-rounded player and has the good guard to go with her. That, yeah, she's a beauty.
The 2026 version of Mallory Hire and Kennedy Sanders, one of my
Yeah.
favorite combinations ever. I don't got
Well,
nicknames for
in
him.
the state, we can look back to you and said he called it. He knew.
I don't have nicknames for him yet. Ask Mike. That's one of my like telltale signs is like I've had Lanky Janky for Kale Jonky. We have Madden's nickname Bucket Greenway, Dynamo Emma, C Money for Coach Getz. Like, if I have a nickname for you, that's usually a pretty telltale sign that I'm pretty high on you as a player. So
I have to work
Mine,
this
yeah.
week.
I'm
Mine,
saying
yes.
if you call games, I'm telling you, Bucket Greenway, C Money for for Coach Getz. I will be forever in your debt if you can work that one into a broadcast.
Mine are pop culture references. Every time I cover the Wilson sisters, I usually make at least one reference to Heart because they were fronted by Ann and Nancy Wilson. And
Mhm.
I shortened one of yours, Eric. You probably have heard me say this when I do a Providence game. I just refer to her kind of sticking with the Heart theme because it gets stuck in my head, Magic Madden.
Mhm.
Because I feel like, yeah, I don't need to add any more words to it. That's just who she is. Or I think more than once I've said, "Oh, Matt Greenway coming up clutch again." So maybe not a nickname, but if you have my respect, I'll usually find a way to do something silly. But I, Eric, I will agree with Pat. Maybe if Maggie Dyer has that breakout session, uh, yes, you can clip this and say, I was there. I think that's what the beauty of these state tournaments are for the casuals. Us three, we get to see it in the regular
Mhm.
season. But for those that maybe check out the tournament or maybe pay more attention because you get more of that press coverage and more big time eyeballs. I mean, I have 15,000 YouTube subscribers, but I'm not KSTC. I don't have the Hubbard umbrella backing me up. It it's that chance
Mhm.
to put yourself out there, and that's the beauty of it. There's always that player, whether it's the role player who makes one good play or the superstar that triumphs. Paige Becker's had to go through the state final several times before finally winning it. Taylor Hill did the same thing, and Madden Greenway had to suffer that loss as a seventh grader before this run of success. I just think the state tournament. Why do we watch the tournaments? Because we're looking for something special. So Rochester Mayo, I think too, because of where they're at, it's harder to get that attention since they can't come up here as frequently. So I feel like, Eric, I'm not going to change my mind, but I feel like you persuaded me enough to say if anyone is due, it might be them, just because they haven't been here in forever. I think most people, longtime fans, would remember them for the Miller twins, Coco
Mhm.
and Kelly, and you got to go back to the mid 90s through 97 for that. So
It's
uh,
once, Mike,
historians will
with
love
Rich
it.
Decker. Rich Decker was coaching them in the 2000s when they snuck in once, but it's been a while. Two quick observations and then a question. The first one, you were talking about the Hill Murray Marshall game. It is a way different game called Outstate versus Metro. And who you get
Mhm.
officiating your game is such a big piece. If you've got outstate officials, tends to be called much closer with
Yep.
hands-on type stuff. If it's a Metro game, it's a college game typically, where it's
Mhm.
much more physical, and the outstate coaches start howling. That's first observation. Second, the next 2 years, Williams is reserved for the Gophers again, much like it is on the boys' weekend. So the girls are almost for sure going to end up at St. Thomas.
Ooh, they're a nice new arena. Okay.
Tournament will be restructured probably because you'll have to play at Schenecker and at Anderson. Two of the classes on one day, two on the other. It'll be interesting now. We won't have the Madden Greenway effect. So it'll be interesting to see how the crowd fits in. And they'll probably have to go 5 and 8 o'clock to get the first crowd out of there to fit everyone in. So I think it seats a little over 5,000. My question, do the Gophers get two home games this year in the NCAA?
As a fan, I know. I said I want as a season ticket holder and someone who's been a fan. I'm going to answer that question and say, "Oh yes." They've finished winning 10 of their last 11 regular season games. I think we have arguably. I will actually make the bold statement. We have the best on-ball defender, one-on-one defender in the entire Big Ten Women's Basketball Conference in Tori McKinney. I know when she missed games, I look at people, I tell people like Washington and UCLA, they had a guard go off for 25 and 23. She doesn't let that happen. When they lost in the Big Ten tournament, even by 5, Tori McKinney was on foul trouble, and that's why Jelani kind of got going. I was there for the Ohio State game when their defense can lock in and you have Amaya looking to attack, Tori scoring, Grace looking to shoot. I think we finally have, I'll give another nickname, the Braun Mamba kind of back after the injuries. I think she's really healthy. She's confident. I say we hosting. I say we host in 2 games.
Mike?
Well, you know me, I had to look up all the resources available to see because the Ohio State loss, I was wondering, would that knock them off the 4 line? And historically, the Big Ten tournament, I don't know what it is. They just have a hard time in the conference tournament, but what do people remember most? It's the NCAA tournament. And Charlie Cream, in his projections, kept Minnesota at that 4 line. I look at what they did. Do they struggle a little bit still against a pressure defense? Yes, that can happen from time to time. And Ohio State, they just had a rotten game. And well, Kevin's going to be coming to me for royalties because what another one of his lines, when you shoot well, you look good. When you don't shoot well, you run into trouble. I added a little bit to that, but it fits so many games. And Minnesota just didn't shoot well from 3. It was a winnable game. They just didn't have enough pieces going their way. But I look at how they did. I think after the Maryland loss,
Yikes.
you're yikes, and then maybe
That was a
folks.
yike times a billion.
Yeah,
It
I
was
was in
that
the arena
game.
for that. That wasn't a fun game to sit in the arena for.
That's the worst loss I think I've ever sat through in a game I thought somebody had in the bag multiple times. Yeah.
And after that loss, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe some folks were thinking, well, here we go again, same song, different verse. But kind of like how Hopkins adjusted after they took a hit
Mhm.
against Wyzetta, Minnesota found a way to prevail. Has it been perfect? No. And a little more depth, I think, could help. But you can't ignore what they did after that. They got to win. USC was ranked at the time, and I know they're without Juju Watkins, so it's tougher for USC this year. And then what do they do? They beat Iowa on the road. They were able to
Only
get that
team to
win.
win. Only team to win in
All right,
Iowa.
the only team to win at Carver Hawkeye. And winning road games at that level is just darn tough. And then you beat Ohio State in the regular season. So they proved they could win and do so consistently against big level opponents. And that's what has me excited to see if Tori's able to get in there. I'm really actually excited and interested to see how she holds up just because I feel she's gone up against tough opponents, but I want to see can she translate that game to higher level competition each night. I think she can. So Minnesota, I do think they host. I think they have enough, but even if they don't, I think about the progression. And folks talk about it was the WNIT and now it's the WBIT, the
Hmm.
consolation tournaments that teams who win that second tier tournament often can turn that into success the next year. Indiana, when they went before they made their runs that included a Final Four, they won the WNIT before success
Hmm.
came their way. And Minnesota, it took a little while. And the Maryland loss again was really frustrating because that was a game they should have won, but this is why I don't bet on sports. You just never know. So I do think they host. And to go off Pat's point, I wasn't aware that the girls' tournament would be the one that would have to shuffle around the goal for women hosting. But it was funny. I got to cover some of the state girls hockey games, and one of the staffers is also one of the communications directors for St. Thomas Athletics, and she had said they were making a play, making a bid to get Anderson Arena to host high school events. Obviously, they can't host a regular season because St. Thomas is Division One, but as a state tournament venue, I'm thinking Anderson Arena would be a perfect venue. Girls basketball, I think, unless the Wilsons or Chloe get to Madden's level of crowds. Well, if that becomes the case, Anderson Arena. I think folks are going to be like, why is it back at Target Center or something like that? But the fact that Anderson Arena plans on hosting, Pat, it's like, I think it would. While the reasons it's unfortunate because of the scheduling conflicts, there are worse problems to have though. If it means you have to work around the Gophers being a potential tournament team every year, but I don't know if either of you have had a chance to see a game at Anderson Arena yet. Everyone has told me it is a fantastic facility, and I'm excited to see the new kid in town, the new neighbor,
Hmm.
get a showcase if that is indeed their plan for next year. And Schenecker, they already hosted the state boys volleyball tournament, and girls basketball I think would be a good fit for them for some of those games that I've seen. And they used to host high school games. They did the Twin Cities tip-off before
Hmm.
they went D1. So that's where I got to see Caitlin Clark before she became the Caitlin Clark. So Anderson Arena, I don't know if you two have had a chance to see it, but
I haven't yet.
I've
I
seen
will.
basketball and hockey. I love it for basketball. I love it even more for hockey. It's a great hockey arena. But for basketball, it'd be great. It seats a little over 5,000. That place would be rocking on Saturday night.
I'm gonna pull a mic and give a historical little fact. In terms of for the Gophers, the last time they lost to Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament was 2004 when they went to the Final Four. So, just gonna say I'm okay losing to Ohio State if history repeats itself.
that's why I
Well,
say it's
all
not
the
the comp.
stuff says they should be the four line still. Maryland losing help, Michigan State losing help. The only thing that can knock them off is West Virginia winning the Big 12 because they're on the five line right now in most.
Yep,
So
Charlie updated last night, and according to Charlie Cream, we are the top overall four seed. We're the number 13
oh
team.
wow, then that's great.
So yeah, so he has us as so I'm hoping he's usually not that far off of like the top seed not even being on there. So he
He
kept us
hasn't had
there.
us on there at all. I mean, we've been fighting to get through the six and then the five. So
Mm-hmm. So yep, he has us as the number 13 team as of last night's updated after the West Virginia game.
there's nobody else that's going to affect that line. So,
Do
and we're still
we
top
hosted.
in the net ranking. They consider that the number one factor. And I don't know how it all calculates. Mike, I'm sure, does because he's got all the numbers. But we were still number nine as of yesterday on the net ranking. So
Yep.
I think we
I've got I've got all the numbers, and you've got Pat saying, "What are stats?" I,
they're good if
to
they
be
back your point of view up.
They are. And to be fair, once the season's done, I throw most of the stats out the window because I keep track of them just for context, especially when you cover Madden and Chloe and Maya Wilson, and you know, okay, I can't just go, oh, this kid's averaging 15 a game because you've got to go a little deeper to say, here's how
Right.
consistent they are. They're getting 30, 40, 50. And that's just a lot. Some of that, and Pat and I've talked about it, top players are hanging around games longer than they used to, so that plays a part in it. But to see them continue to produce at such a consistent level, that tells me they put in the work as well. So it's a lot of fun. And Eric, to your point, that's why I say the conference tournaments, yeah, they represent the last chance to build the resume. But again, that's not the tournament you're aiming for necessarily because they know it's what you do in the big tournament that
Hmm.
can propel you and your team forward. And to see Minnesota, it's been an 8 year gap. Interestingly, the last time they got there, Carly Wagner was still on the team. I think Minnesota got to the second round that year.
Yep. And then Sabrina Ionescu them.
Well, like I said, it's like all those teams that had to go against Providence and got run out of the building. Yet
Hmm.
you had to play against the best player, one of the best in state history. So, yes, it stinks in the moment, but give
Hmm.
yourself some grace too. Not many can stop a Madden or a Sabrina,
Oh.
but I'm excited. I'm excited to see if this will help get more attention back to Minnesota after they've been through some lean years, and the last couple, I know some fans were a little antsy because maybe they wanted a faster progression, but
Right.
Over time, Grant McGinnis has said the same thing. Don Plitzowite, that is slowly building up a contending team. And let's not forget, Mallory Heyer, right before the season, transferred to Oregon, and the Gophers still held their own.
And Woodson got hurt again. She was another key piece, either of the last 2 years, if she stays healthy.
And speaking of nicknames, we'll wrap it up. Donnie P is going to be hosting, but we are going to be in Donnie P and the Gophers' house this week. So once again, I want to say thank you to both of you for taking the time to do this preview. I said, we're only what, less than 48 hours away from the start of
But
the.
tomorrow night, 10 o'clock Wednesday morning. Let's go.
There we go. I said once again, thank you both for doing this. I'm excited. We'll see if our predictions come true. Maybe we're both wrong and Benilde and Hopkins get upset along the way. I didn't say that, Coach Alexis Garcia. Don't get mad at me. But maybe we're along the way. So I said, but once again, thank you so much for taking the time. Everyone, I said, come say hi to us if you see us at the event. Me, Mike, Pat, come say hi to us. I'll be in the stands. Mike, you might be calling out. You might be there, might not be there. We'll see.
Well,
I'll be courtside.
I
Pat will be
will
courtside.
I will be there for at least 1 day. So if I'm not calling any games, if I may go back to one of my earlier plugs, I will be there on Saturday during the day session. Pat is going to be hosting this. So, Pat, I hope you've got your speech ready. The Miss Basketball reunion as part of the state's 50th anniversary celebration. And if you are a history buff like the three of us are, in the night session, they will honor the Class A and 2A champions from 1976, the first year girls basketball was a sport. So, I'll be there in the day session on Saturday because I will be seeing who returns out of the Miss Basketball contingent and catching up. I know a few friends of mine who are part of that group said they plan to attend, and I know I'm excited to see a bunch of old, what am I saying? A bunch of old faces, a bunch of historical faces. So I will be there at least 1 day, and maybe I'll stick around in the afternoon so to say hello. But yeah, I'm excited to see who's all going to be there, Pat and Eric. I know you'll be watching the games, but I have to think it will be cool for you just to see who all comes back because you've been around this sport a long time. I remember you and I chatting when I did the girlhood exhibit and how fun it was for you to listen to my interviews with all the past winners from the
Mhm.
90s through Olivia Olson at the time. That's what excites me most, the games, of course, but the fact that the high school league and Pat, I don't know how much pull you had, are taking these steps to celebrate the sport's history. I think that's a pretty big deal because we all praise some of the recent talents to come out of here, but what we're seeing Madden and Tori Orline, great career, and Chloe Johnson, what they're doing is just a continuation of what Lisa Lissamore did in 1976 or Janet Carvin in 1980 or some of the Pat, I forget all the names you mentioned when we
Oh, the
met
Miller,
last year
for sure.
in the late
Miller,
80s.
Shannon
The,
Bolden.
right, but no, Pat had some great names from the late 80s that I can't remember because I was an infant. And then the Miller twins, Tamara Moore, Angel Robinson, Rebecca Dahlman, Carly Wagner. They were both Miss Basketball winners, and maybe there's a chance they reunite. I know those two still stay in touch, so can you tell I'm excited?
I think we all are, but we'll wrap it up there. I said thank you once again so much. I said everyone, let's have a great weekend. I think we're gonna have a great weekend or week of games. Let's see if we can make some history this weekend.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah. Absolutely.